Hey, spooky friends, it's Lainey from It's Haunted What Now and True Crime Cases with Lainey, and I've got some thrilling news to share. I'm beyond excited to announce that the Beyond the Veil Festival is coming to New Orleans, Louisiana on September 27th through the 28th, 2025. This isn't your average paranormal event. Beyond the Veil is all about creating a safe, inclusive space where we promote ethics in paranormal content and spotlight voices that are often pushed aside, including BIPOC, queer, and women creators. Early bird tickets are now on sale and you can grab them at the lowest price available. But act fast because these tickets are limited and won't last long. Join us for an intimate, immersive experience where you can connect with like-minded enthusiasts and explore the paranormal world in a meaningful way. Head to beyondtheveilfest.com or click the link in the show notes to get your tickets and to be part of this extraordinary festival. I can't wait to see you there and dive into the mysteries that await. Until then. Did you hear that? Welcome back to It's Haunted, What Now? I'm your host, Lainey. If you were going to haunt somewhere, where would it be? I know it's not something anybody really gets to choose, but hypothetically, I'm very curious what your answer would be. If you're on Spotify, you can actually answer this poll, so I can't wait to see your responses. So think about somewhere you loved, like a theme park, a house you really liked, a sports arena so you get an afterlife pass to the Superbowl free of charge. I personally think it would be alright haunting a cinema screen for the rest of forever, as long as you had enough cognizance to actually watch the movies. But I'm not sure I would want to be stuck haunting the places we visit in today's episode. In today's stories, we'll hear about spirits appearing everywhere from hospital waiting rooms to inside antiques to the aisles of grocery stores. Okay, ready to get spooked? Story 1 is from Silverwater 8231, whose hospital stay was made all the more stressful by a strange visitor. I was confined at a hospital in Manila for severe pneumonia back in 2021. This was during the pandemic lockdown when masks were mandatory, and I was about to be assigned a room when I saw a toddler in a red polka dot dress galloping around the emergency room, then leaving through the glass entrance. She had no mask on, so I asked security if children were allowed. The guard said in Filipino, "No children allowed." And I was confused. Wasn't he seeing this rowdy kid? After I was confined to a room on the 5th floor, I fell asleep and had a weird dream. In the dream, I went downstairs and saw the young girl outside the emergency room, only she was weeping in anger and holding a hammer. When she looked up, she screamed, "Pa, why did you leave me?" Scared of being hit with the hammer, I ran up the dim stairwell back to the 5th floor. All I remember was that I was slowly running out of breath, and when I looked back, I saw the girl chasing after me. Only instead of running, she was floating up the staircase. It felt like I climbed more than 20 floors instead of 5, because it just went on and on, all the while a pleading voice screaming, "Pa!" flooded the stairwell around me. By the time I reached my bed, I was physically out of breath, and that's when I woke up with a dangerously low oxygen level. I was gasping for air and already surrounded by 2 attending nurses. I was intubated for a few days after that. When I regained consciousness, I talked about my dream to my attending nurse. She froze in shock before asking if the girl was wearing a polka dot dress. I asked how she knew. Apparently, my dream was ominously similar to over 10 from different patients throughout the decades. They all shared the same details. A girl in a polka dot dress showed up in the emergency area first. then in their dreams where they were chased until they got jolted awake. Apparently, the existence of this girl has been an open secret among the hospital staff dating back to the 70s and is a story passed down among the workers. The backstory goes like this. More than 40 years ago, a small child with dengue fever was brought to the hospital by a young Chinese dad in his 20s. For reasons unknown, perhaps because she was an illegitimate child not recognized by the dad's parents, he left and never came back. He left her at the hospital to die. The hospital wasn't able to record the proper identity of the little girl, and she eventually died alone from her fever. She was buried in the cemetery right across from the hospital. A group of nurses helped arrange the burial, and they named her Shobi, which is a Chinese Filipino name for youngest daughter. She wore a red polka dot dress. The nurse then told me they have never actually seen the ghost. They only know of its existence. What they do know, however, is that the ghost only shows herself to certain people. Eerily, me and the other patients who have reported seeing her have the same physical attributes. East Asian looking, i.e. Chinese, in our 20s, average build, around 5'8", and on the brink of death. Maybe all these patients resembled her dad. Did I remind her of her dad? I figured the ghost of the girl is still on the search for her father. I'm not gonna lie, in that dream, it felt like I was running away from death and it just kept catching up on me. But in hindsight, I realized maybe the girl only wanted a dad. What if she wanted to bring a dad with her to the afterlife? By some miracle, I survived the whole ordeal. I went back to that hospital last year for a routine checkup, but never saw the girl again. Call it a blessing or a curse dreaming about her. The chase woke me up to a second life. I hope you find peace wherever you are, little girl. First off, I'm so glad that you managed to recover from pneumonia. I can't even imagine how terrifying that must have been, especially during lockdown. As for the little girl, her story is completely heartbreaking. I think I find myself agreeing with you in the belief that she's just trying to find the dad who abandoned her so very many years ago, and it's sad that they didn't even have a real name to bury her with. After 40 years haunting the hospital, I'm afraid it doesn't seem likely that she'll be able to move on, as tragic as that is. Our next story comes from an anonymous teller, whose place of employment has led to a number of odd experiences. Hi everyone. I'd like to preface this by saying that working at my job has completely changed my perspective on the paranormal. For context, I work at a vintage store that specializes in old and antique Western American artifacts. The store is located in a wealthy part of the state, where a lot of wealthy people buy in bulk to decorate their second and third homes. This means we have a lot of sourced items being moved in and out of the store at all times. I am not part of sourcing anything. I simply sell items once they're here and help manage the store. Most, if not all, of the items obviously have energy attached to them, and not always good energy either. Also, because items come and go so frequently, the strange energies and events tend to stop and start too. Within 3 months of working there, I knew it was haunted and that the resident spirits had taken a liking to me. Experience 1. My moment of realization. Things were sort of weird from the beginning, but I always chalked it up to being a somewhat old building. One morning I was opening the store on my own. It was the dead of winter and everything was dark and snowed in. The moment I walk in, it's freezing, so I think the heater must have conked out during the night. I go to turn it on and see it's working perfectly fine, but the warmth it's emitting seems to be dissipating after a couple of feet. I ignore it and turn on the main floor lights, then walk downstairs to where we keep the majority of our vintage items. It's pitch black, and before I can turn on the lights, our music turns on at full blast. The problem is, the music isn't an automatic system. I control it myself from my phone, and I had yet to turn the system on. I was the only one in the building and around the general vicinity, so no one else could have turned it on from their phone. After calming down from the scare, I turn on the lights to discover that all the pillows have been thrown off our massive vintage leather couch. I still think it's weird, but try to rationalize it by saying maintenance must have come in the night to fix something, and they did that. The light switches are physically in the off position, so it's not like we just lost power. Again, I ignore it and turn them on again and walk outside to open the front door and turn on our open sign. This is the moment where I realized everything happening was paranormal. Our locally made chapstick display, a heavy thing, gets completely swept off the shelf, like someone aggressively pushed it off in front of me. It did not fall, the shelf didn't budge, it was pushed off. 50 to 100 chapsticks go flying everywhere and the acrylic case shatters into pieces. The music system suddenly starts playing music very loudly again, and I'm just frozen in shock. Then, just as suddenly, things suddenly get very quiet. It was as if it or they just wanted me to finally acknowledge it. The computer screen turned on seconds later as if it was telling me to get to work now. I think I stood there for just a solid 10 minutes, just frozen. Experience 2. The Wall of Mirrors. This took place around 4 months ago. Our main vintage collector had brought in old vintage mirrors he'd found in different places and constructed a wall of them on the side of the stairs going down. I came back from vacation, slightly horrified. I feel like mirrors just hold really bad energy, especially ones owned by other people before. It was a normal day at work, helping customers, logging inventory, etc. One of the employees was working with me, and we were casually chatting about life. Anyways, she went downstairs to help a customer with finding the price on a vintage fur coat and some artwork. But then, when the customer's daughter is walking upstairs past the mirror wall, she screams. Being the person in charge, I run towards the screen to check on everything. This girl is inconsolable and claiming that she saw a shadowy figure in the mirror. The mom is calming her daughter, saying it's just a shadow. I investigate. I don't see anything, just the normal bad feeling I experience passing the mirrors. We help this lady and she eventually leaves with her items. A couple hours later, a different woman wants to buy a wall coat rack right by the mirrors. As I'm using the drill to remove the coat rack from the wall, my coworker is holding the other end of the coat rack to keep it steady. Then her face pales. She's staring at the mirrors and can't look away. I see her do a double take and continue to stare at them. I'm concerned and finish helping the coat rack lady out. Then, immediately after she leaves, I return to my coworker who is still just staring at the mirrors. It's as if she was in a trance. I shake her out of it and she can't speak. She eventually managed to say my name and I looked back at the mirrors then. That's when I saw the figure. A morphing figure, subtly taking on vague appearances. Some feminine, others masculine. No face, just features. Used to these things around here by now, I drag my coworker upstairs and sort of ignore it. The rest of the day, I heard from multiple customers about how they thought they were seeing things in that same mirror. One girl even threw up in the bathroom because she said she suddenly felt so sick walking downstairs. When I came back from my shift the next week, that exact mirror was gone. My other coworker had informed me that it didn't sell. Instead, one of the other employees walked down one day to find it cracked. I don't know what happened to it or where it went, but the rest of the mirrors are still there. All of the relatively younger employees seem to experience things, but not as much as I do. The older employees don't seem to experience as much, but they agree there are weird things. Anyways, thank you for reading this. Okay, no thank you to exactly all of this. While it doesn't surprise me that antique stores are like a grand central station for ghosts and odd energies, that doesn't mean I would want to work around spirits who throw chapstick tantrums if you don't pay them enough attention. Hi, I already have a 3-year-old toddler, I'm solid. That said though, since you're used to it, they're probably no different from annoying customers one way or another. Anyway, that mirror wall gives me bad vibes even without the problem mirror. I just don't like the idea of that. There are too many stories and cultures about spirits of the dead being trapped in mirrors if they're left uncovered, and the fluctuating appearance you witnessed makes me wonder just how many souls were trapped in that one, and what happened when it cracked. The next story we have for you comes from BoredBitch011, who saw someone, or something, shocking when she and her sister were teens. When I was 16 and my sister was 14, we used to go to our grandma's house every day after school to take care of her barn cats. And before we went, we always stopped at the only tiny little grocery store in our town. We would get soda and Little Debbie cakes and dispose of the evidence in the barn burn barrels so our parents wouldn't get mad. One day we were in the store and my sister and I were at opposite ends of the aisle. I went to walk around to the next aisle and I was looking down at the floor like I always do. I have social anxiety and I avoid eye contact at all costs. That's when I saw a pair of worn brown boots. Work boots like all the men in town wore. Nothing crazy. Then I saw jeans, also worn. It felt like slow motion. Then I saw the hands, swollen, bulbous, and wet, pale white like a dead body. I immediately felt chills run down my spine, and I continued looking up. It still felt like slow motion. I saw his button-down red flannel shirt, and then I saw his face. It was like it was melting. His mouth was just a black hole, and I believe his eyes were too. I didn't look for more than half a second before my flight instinct forced me to turn around and walk back down the aisle. I wanted to run, but I was so scared that he would chase me if I ran. So I very purposefully kept my regular pace and walked to my sister before I turned around to make sure he wasn't following me. He was not. I told my sister, "You need to go down the aisle and look to your left. Right now." She laughed, thinking it was a cute boy or something, and I was like, "Dude, no, I'm being serious. You need to look." She walked over and I stayed a few paces behind. When she reached the end of the aisle, she froze, staring in front of her like she was seeing a ghost. I believe she was. Her fear response was to freeze. I said her name and she didn't react. She was completely frozen in fear. I tried again and she didn't answer, so I grabbed her arm and yanked her, and we both ran as fast as we could back down the aisle and to the other side of the store. We both were shaking. I asked her what she saw and she described exactly what I had seen. It was not human. There is no way that anybody could ever convince me it was, and the energy around it was so foul and rotten. We had both had experiences with the paranormal before, but nothing like this. We looked around to see if anyone else was scared, but everyone else was just being normal, like they hadn't seen it. I told her we should ask the staff in the store to check the cameras, but she said there was no way they'd let us and they'd probably just call us crazy. I knew she was right, so we left. Then that night, she woke up and saw the figure standing in her doorway. She squeezed her eyes shut and didn't open them again until morning, by which point it was gone. I never saw it again, and I'm honestly convinced that the second time she saw it, it was sleep paralysis, a nightmare, or a hallucination brought on by the fear she'd felt earlier. We went to a Catholic school, and my sister was so affected by this experience that she went to speak to the parish priest. He was no help at all. He said people in our state are crazy, and it was probably just a guy in a mask. If I have ever been sure about anything in my life, I know it was not a mask. I know. I don't know what it was, but it was not human. To this day, my sister can't speak of it. It affected her a lot. She's scared to talk about it because she's worried that she might draw it back towards her. I don't really know why I'm writing this. I guess because I need to talk to someone about it, and the only person who would believe me because she saw it too can't talk about it. Let me know your thoughts on this. For context, this occurred about 6 years ago. So I read through some of the feedback on this story, and one seemingly reasonable explanation people have come up with is that the figure you saw could have been a real person suffering from severe burns. But given your story as a whole, I don't think that I agree. To me, the description you've given sounds more like the body of someone who had drowned than the damage left on people who have survived severe burns. And no living person who has gaping black holes for facial features can realistically walk around unassisted as this figure did. The clothes you saw them wearing in particular have me wondering if this is someone who died in a worksite accident, and if there's maybe a history of your town to look into to find out more about it. Regardless, I'm glad it hasn't returned to either of you since your sister's nightmare. Today's final story comes from an email sent by Brianna and tells us about a touching final encounter. This story is about a spirit who visited my dreams to let me know that they had passed. For background, Jerry was a good friend and coworker I'd known for about 3 years. I found out in January 2024 that he had fallen ill to pancreatic cancer and didn't know how long he had left. I kept in pretty regular contact with Jerry until one day, when I realized I hadn't heard from him in at least 2 weeks. I started asking my best friend to text him since we were all coworkers, and so she did. But he still didn't respond. I felt it in the pit of my stomach that something was wrong. Now, a little bit about me. I've always had dreams of ghosts trying to communicate with me, and I always end up with sleep paralysis, screaming at them that they are dead and to leave me alone. I follow this up with a few Hail Marys, and usually it makes the experience pass. After trying to call Jerry over and over, I left a voicemail telling him I hoped he was okay and to contact me any way he can. It's important to mention he also knew of the dreams I've had, and he was also very into ghost hunting, though he never really believed in them. Anyway, that night, Jerry visited me in my dreams. I can't for the life of me remember what was said to me, but coincidentally, later that day, my work best friend called me. She told me Jerry's mother had gone into our old work and let them know he had passed away a week earlier. I was left speechless and broke down in tears after that phone call. I felt as if he was telling me, "Hey, I know you're asking about me," and he had to let me know that he had passed before I actually found out from someone else. I'll always miss and cherish meeting that wonderful soul that was Jerry. See, it always makes me so very happy to hear that some of the spirits that transcend the veil do it for reasons of kindness rather than malice. Thank you so much for letting me share this, and I hope that Jerry's happy wherever he is now. Well, that does it for this episode, unless you're an Apple Plus subscriber, in which case, stay tuned after the credits, where you'll get to hear 2 additional stories as a special treat. Well, that does it for this episode. If you'd like to submit your own personal spooky tale to be read on the show, head to hauntedpod.com and click on the link to submit your story. You can also email me at hauntedpod@gmail.com. We thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. It really does help. You can find us on Twitter at podcast_haunted, Instagram at It's Haunted What Now, or at hauntedpod.com. Production assistance and writing assistance by Jesse Hawk from the Inky Paw Print. The official composer and audiosmith for the show is Neeks at We Talk of Dreams. Check him out on Twitter at We Talk of Dreams or wetalkofdreams.com. Until next time. Did you hear that?